A mysterious woman in a crimson gown captivates the elite at a glittering gala. Her bold kiss with millionaire Isaac Thornton shattering their secret contract and sparking whispers of her identity. As his mother's knowing gaze hints at a hidden past, a dangerous game unfolds. Before you dive into this thrilling tale, share where you're watching from and rate this captivating story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Enjoy. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria shimmered under a constellation of chandeliers, their crystal prisms scattering golden light across a sea of black tuxedos and extravagant gowns. The air buzzed with the clink of champagne flutes, the murmur of polished laughter, and the delicate strains of a string quartet weaving through the crowd. Every step on the polished marble floor echoed wealth, power, and secrets. Secrets that clung to the room like perfume. At precisely 8 p.m., the hum of conversation faltered, heads turned, and a hush swept through the elite as Isaac Thornton, the 32-year-old self-made millionaire and youngest CEO in Thornton Enterprises' storied century, strode through the arched entrance. His tailored, midnight tuxedo hugged his lean frame, accentuating the sharp angles of his jaw and the cool intensity of his slate-gray eyes. His dark hair, slicked back with precision, gleamed under the lights, and his presence commanded the room, as it had every boardroom and Forbes spread before. On his arm was a woman no one in this rarefied circle recognized. Yara Monroe moved with a feline grace, her crimson silk gown clinging to every curve, catching the chandelier light with each deliberate step. A diamond choker glittered at her throat, too bold for old money, too flawless to be anything but real. Her lips, painted a dangerous shade of scarlet, curved into a smile that seemed to know exactly how many eyes followed her. Whispers ignited like sparks. Who is she? Not one of us. A model? An heiress? Isaac's stride never wavered, his expression a mask of cold control. But beneath it, a flicker of unease stirred. He had met Yara 4 days ago in a dimly lit lounge, her agreement to pose as his wife secured with a sum that made her pause, and one peculiar condition she refused to explain. Tonight, he was here to honor his mother Margaret's frail, fervent wish to see her only son settled before she left this world. But Yara was no ordinary hire, and the weight of her presence pressed against his instincts like a blade. They reached the center of the ballroom, where a cluster of Thornton Enterprises board members stood, their manicured hands clutching flutes that trembled faintly. At their core sat Margaret Thornton, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her frame diminished by illness, but her eyes alight with a radiant intensity. She had begged Isaac for months, her voice trembling through late-night calls. "Don't let me die without knowing you're happy, Isaac. Find someone. Settle." Now, as her gaze locked on her son and the woman beside him, something shifted in her expression. Not joy, but a shadow of recognition that made Isaac's pulse quicken. He tightened his grip on Yara's hand. The gesture meant to sell their charade, but her skin was cool, her fingers steady, as if she were the one anchoring him. "Ready?" Isaac murmured, his voice low, his eyes fixed ahead. "Always," Yara replied, her tone smooth as velvet, her smile unwavering for the cameras that flashed like vultures circling prey. Then, without warning, she turned to him, her breath brushing his cheek. Before he could react, her lips met his in a kiss that was anything but contractual. It was bold, searing, a public declaration that sent gasps rippling through the crowd like a stone shattering still water. Isaac froze, the warmth of her mouth a violation of their agreement. No physical contact she'd promised. His hand shot to his pocket, pulling out a silk handkerchief to wipe his lips, the gesture sharp with irritation. The crowd's whispers grew louder. Scandalous. Improper. "Who does she think she is?" Isaac's jaw clenched, his mind racing. Why had she done it? What game was she playing? Yara's smile didn't falter, but her eyes, dark and unreadable, held a glint of challenge. "Your mother's watching," she whispered, her voice a private thread in the chaos. "Let's give her what she wants." Isaac forced a smile for the cameras, but his gaze flicked to Margaret. Her frail hands gripped the arms of her ornate chair, her expression no longer soft but piercing, as if she were peeling back Yara's crimson veneer to uncover a face from decades past. The recognition in her eyes was unmistakable, a silent accusation that sent a chill down Isaac's spine. He leaned closer to Yara, his voice a controlled hiss. "You broke the rules." "Maybe," she replied, her lips barely moving. "But you're paying me to play the part. I'm playing it well." Across the room, Isaac's uncle, Victor Thornton, chairman of the board, watched with a predator's stillness. His charcoal suit was impeccable, but his eyes were cold, his thin smile laced with skepticism as he raised his glass in a mock toast. "To the happy couple," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to turn, his tone dripping with doubt. Isaac's grip on Yara's hand tightened, not for show but to steady himself. Victor's disdain was expected, but Margaret's reaction was not. What did his mother know about Yara? Why had Yara risked their deal with that kiss? And what was the condition she'd insisted upon, the one that made her hesitate before accepting his offer? As the quartet's music swelled, Isaac guided Yara toward the family's reserved table, the weight of 1,000 stares pressing against them. The gala was meant to be a performance, a single night to appease his mother. But now, with Margaret's knowing gaze, Victor's silent judgment, and Yara's reckless defiance, Isaac felt the ground shift beneath him. This was no longer a charade. It was the opening move in a game he hadn't agreed to play, and Yara Monroe, with her crimson dress and hidden motives, held the first piece. The opening move had been played, and as Isaac Thornton guided Yara Monroe toward the family's reserved table, the weight of the gala's stairs clung to him like damp silk. The chandeliers above cast fractured light across the Waldorf Astoria's ballroom, but the brilliance did nothing to dispel the chill of his mother's knowing gaze or the sting of Yara's reckless kiss. Isaac's polished smile held firm for the cameras, but beneath it, questions churned. What did Margaret know about Yara? What was the condition she'd hidden behind that crimson smile? As they reached the table, Victor Thornton, Isaac's uncle and chairman of Thornton Enterprises, rose with a predator's grace, his charcoal suit as sharp as his scrutiny. His glass tilted in a mock salute, but his eyes locked on Yara with a coldness that could cut glass. "A pleasure, I'm sure, Mrs. Thornton," he said, the title laced with skepticism that drew a ripple of glances from nearby guests. Isaac's grip on Yara's arm tightened, a silent warning, but her composure remained unshaken, her lips curving in a practiced smile. "The pleasure's mine, Victor," she replied, her voice warm with a calculated pinch of deference. Isaac seated Yara beside him, his movements mechanical, his mind racing to parse the undercurrents swirling around the table. Margaret, frail yet regal in her emerald gown, watched Yara with an intensity that belied her weakened state. Her fingers, adorned with a single sapphire ring, trembled slightly as she lifted her champagne flute, but her eyes never wavered. Isaac caught the look again, that flicker of recognition, sharp and unsettling, as if Yara were a ghost from a past his mother had buried. He leaned toward her, his voice low. "Mother, are you feeling all right?" Margaret's lips parted, but before she could answer, Victor interjected, his tone smooth as polished steel. "She's fine, Isaac. Just surprised, like the rest of us, by your choice of companion." The barb landed, and Isaac's jaw tightened, but Yara's hand brushed his under the table, a fleeting gesture that felt more like a signal than reassurance. The evening wore on, the quartet's music fading into a backdrop for speeches and toasts. But Isaac's focus remained split between Victor's veiled hostility and Margaret's unspoken knowledge. As dessert was served, petite towers of chocolate and gold leaf. A vibration in his pocket broke his thoughts. He excused himself, stepping into a shadowed alcove near the ballroom's edge, and answered the call. "Thornton," he said, his voice clipped. The voice on the other end was gravelly, authoritative, and unfamiliar. "Mr. Thornton, this is Detective Samuel Harper, NYPD. We need to speak. It's about your mother." Isaac's spine stiffened, the Gala's opulence fading into a distant hum. "What's happened?" he asked, his pulse quickening. Harper's tone was measured but urgent. "Nothing fatal, but she was followed tonight leaving her residence. A black sedan, no plates. We lost it in traffic, but this wasn't random. Keep your new wife close, Mr. Thornton, and watch your back." The line went dead before Isaac could press further, leaving him staring at the phone. The detective's words coiling like smoke in his chest. He returned to the table, his expression a mask of calm. But Yara's dark eyes caught the shift in him. "Trouble?" she murmured, her voice barely audible over the clink of silverware. Isaac didn't answer, his gaze flicking to Margaret, who was now engaged in polite conversation with a board member, her smile brittle. The gala ended in a blur of farewells, and as Isaac and Yara stepped into the cool Manhattan night, the limo waiting like a silent sentinel, he felt the weight of Harper's warning settle deeper. Inside the car, Yara leaned back, her crimson gown pooling like blood against the leather seats. "You're quiet," she said, her tone probing. Isaac's eyes met hers, sharp and unyielding. "Someone followed my mother tonight. Care to explain why?" Her smile faltered just for a moment before she regained her composure. "I wouldn't know," she said, but the slight hitch in her voice betrayed her. The next morning, in the stark light of his office atop Thornton Enterprises' glass tower, Isaac was still grappling with the detective's call when his assistant buzzed in. "Sir, there's a woman here to see you. Says she's a friend of your wife." Curiosity overrode his instinct to refuse, and he nodded. "Send her in." The woman who entered was a stark contrast to Yara, mid-40s, dressed in a plain cardigan and jeans, her sharp green eyes the only echo of her sister. "My name's Clara," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I'm Yara's sister, and if you care about her, you'll get her out of this city." She pressed a folded envelope into his hand, her fingers trembling. "Don't open it here. She'll know I came. And if she asks, you never saw me." Before Isaac could respond, Clara slipped out, leaving him alone with the envelope's weight. He tore it open, revealing a grainy photograph. Yara, younger, standing beside Victor in a dimly lit alley, her face tense, his smile predatory. Scrawled on the back were 3 words: "He owns her." Isaac's breath caught, the image searing into his mind. The photograph linked Yara to Victor, to a past that Margaret's gaze had already hinted at. What hold did his uncle have over Yara? Why was Margaret followed? And what was the condition Yara had set, the secret that made her hesitate before stepping into his world? As he slipped the photograph into his jacket, the city skyline beyond his window gleamed with a false promise of clarity. The game, whatever it was, had just drawn its first blood, and Isaac was no longer certain who held the board. The game had drawn its first blood, and as Isaac Thornton tucked the photograph into his jacket, the city skyline beyond his office window seemed to mock him with its cold, unyielding gleam. The image of Yara Monroe, standing beside his Uncle Victor in that shadowed alley, coupled with Clara's cryptic warning, "He owns her," burned in his mind like a brand. The pieces of this puzzle were jagged, refusing to fit, and Isaac's instincts screamed that Yara's secrets were only the beginning. He stood, the leather of his chair creaking as he moved to the window, Manhattan sprawling below like a chessboard, where every move carried a price. The morning light did little to dispel the weight of yesterday's gala, where Yara's reckless kiss and his mother Margaret's knowing gaze had shifted the ground beneath him. Now, Clara's photograph and Detective Harper's warning about Margaret being followed pointed to a conspiracy woven deep into his family's empire. Isaac's phone buzzed, shattering the silence. The caller ID read, "Restricted," and he answered with a clipped, "Thornton." The voice on the other end was sharp, laced with urgency. "Isaac, it's Daniel Reed. We need to meet. Now." Reed, an investigative journalist notorious for dismantling corporate giants, had crossed Isaac's path before. His exposés on Thornton Enterprises' competitors, both admired and feared. "Why?" Isaac asked, his tone guarded. Reed's response was blunt. "Because your uncle's bleeding your company dry, and I have proof. Meet me at the Blue Haven Cafe, Lower East Side, in an hour. Come alone." The line went dead, leaving Isaac gripping the phone, his pulse a steady drumbeat. Reed's call wasn't a coincidence. Not after Clara's warning, not after Harper's. He grabbed his coat, the photograph's weight a silent dare in his pocket, and headed out. The Blue Haven Cafe was a nondescript hole in the wall, its faded awning and chipped formica tables a stark contrast to the Waldorf's opulence. Reed sat in a corner booth, his wiry frame hunched over a coffee, a manila folder beside him. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, flicked up as Isaac slid into the seat opposite. "You look like hell," Reed said, pushing the folder across the table. Isaac ignored the jab, opening the folder to find printouts of financial records, wire transfers, offshore accounts, shell companies, all tied to Thornton Enterprises. The numbers were staggering, millions siphoned through a web of transactions labeled Zurich Initiative. "Victor's work," Reed said, his voice low. "He's been laundering money through your company for years, hiding it behind charitable fronts. Your board's either clueless or complicit." Isaac's fingers tightened on the papers, his uncle's predatory smile from the Gala flashing in his mind. "Why tell me?" he asked. Reed leaned forward, his gaze unyielding. "Because someone's feeding me this, and they want you to know before it hits the press. My guess? They're betting you'll do something stupid." Isaac returned to his penthouse, the folder burning a hole in his briefcase. Yara was there, barefoot in the kitchen, slicing an apple with surgical precision, her crimson lipstick traded for a natural hue that did nothing to soften her edge. She glanced up, her dark eyes catching the tension in his frame. "Bad day at the office?" she asked, her tone teasing but probing. Isaac tossed the folder onto the counter, the papers spilling out. "Explain this," he said, his voice steel. Yara's knife paused mid-slice, her gaze locking on the documents. She set the knife down, wiping her hands on a towel, and stepped closer, scanning the pages. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers twitched, betraying a flicker of unease. "Victor's handiwork," she said finally, her voice low. "I didn't want to be part of it, Isaac. He didn't give me a choice." "Start talking," Isaac demanded, crossing his arms. Yara's eyes met his, unflinching but heavy with something like regret. "Years ago, my family was drowning in debt, my brother mostly. Victor paid it off, but the price was me. I ran errands, played courier, kept my mouth shut. He had leverage, Isaac, names, dates, proof that could have destroyed us." Her voice cracked, just once, before she steadied it. "I got out when I could, but not clean. Not entirely." Isaac's jaw tightened, Reed's words echoing. "Someone's feeding me this." Was Yara the source, playing both sides? Or was she a pawn, caught in Victor's web? "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his tone colder than he intended. Yara's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You still don't." The silence between them was a live wire, taut and dangerous. Isaac's mind raced, piecing together the photograph, Margaret's recognition, Harper's warning, and now Reed's evidence. Victor wasn't just a skeptic at the Gala. He was a predator, bleeding Thornton Enterprises dry while hiding behind its legacy. But Yara's role, her past with Victor, Her unexplained condition cast a shadow over her every word. Was she a victim, a conspirator, or something else entirely? Before he could press further, his phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. Pier 39 midnight tomorrow. Bring her. Come alone. Attached was a grainy image of Margaret stepping out of her car, unaware of the camera. Isaac's blood ran cold. He showed the phone to Yara, whose face paled, her composure cracking for the first time. "Victor," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Isaac pocketed the phone, his decision made. "We're going," he said, his voice ablaze. Yara nodded, but her eyes held a warning, as if she knew the dock would be more than a meeting, a trap. As the city's neon pulse throbbed beyond the penthouse windows, Isaac felt the stakes sharpen. Victor's corruption was no longer just a betrayal of the company. It was a threat to his mother, to Yara, to everything he'd built. But the real question gnawed at him. Could he trust the woman standing beside him? Or was she the key to Victor's game? The night stretched ahead, dark and unyielding, promising answers only at a cost. The night stretched dark and unyielding, its promise of answers laced with a cost Isaac Thornton could feel in his bones as he stood in his penthouse, the city's neon pulse flickering beyond the glass. The text from an unknown number, Pier 39 midnight tomorrow, bring her. Come alone. Burned in his mind, the attached image of his mother Margaret, oblivious to the camera's eye, tightening the coil of dread in his chest. Yara Monroe stood across from him, her pale face betraying a crack in her usual poise, her whisper of "Victor" confirming the sender's identity. Isaac's decision to confront his uncle at the dock was a blade's edge, sharp with risk, but the evidence of Victor's money laundering, revealed by Daniel Reed's documents, and Yara's reluctant admission, left no room for hesitation. The game had escalated, and Pier 39 would be its crucible. Isaac spent the next day orchestrating his move with surgical precision. He contacted Detective Samuel Harper, whose warning about Margaret being followed still echoed, and secured his cooperation for an ambush. "Unmarked units, Pier 39 midnight," Isaac instructed, his voice steady despite the stakes. Harper's response was curt but compliant. "If you're playing me, Thornton, you'll regret it." Isaac ignored the threat, his focus on the plan. Draw Victor out, free Margaret, expose his crimes. Yara, however, was a wild card. Her past with Victor, her coerced role as his courier, bound by threats to her family, gnawed at Isaac's trust. Yet her haunted eyes, fixed on the photograph of Margaret, suggested a loyalty he couldn't dismiss. "You're sure about this?" she asked, her voice low, as they prepared to leave the penthouse. Isaac met her gaze, unflinching. "I'm sure I don't have a choice." At 11:45 p.m., Isaac and Yara pulled up near Pier 39 in a black SUV, the air thick with salt and rust. The dock loomed under sodium lights, its stacked shipping containers casting jagged shadows. Isaac killed the engine, his night vision binoculars revealing snipers perched on crates, their scopes glinting like predators' eyes. "Victor's not playing," Yara murmured, her breath fogging the window. Isaac nodded, his jaw tight. "Neither are we." They stepped out, the damp wood creaking beneath their boots, and moved toward the rendezvous point, a floodlit patch of cracked concrete where Victor waited, flanked by two men in dark coats. Margaret sat bound to a chair, her silver hair disheveled, her eyes wide with fear, but unbroken. Victor spread his arms, his smile a venomous curve. "Isaac, my favorite nephew, and Yara, ever the loyal runaway." "Let her go, Victor," Isaac said, his voice steel, his hand hovering near the concealed pistol at his waist. Victor's chuckle was dry, cutting through the night. "You think I called you here to negotiate? I'm here to choose your loss." He gestured to one of his men, who shoved Margaret's chair forward, her muffled gasp piercing Isaac's resolve. Yara stepped closer, her crimson scarf a stark contrast to the dock's grime. "This ends tonight, Victor," she said, her tone steady, but laced with defiance. Victor's eyes narrowed, amused. "Oh, it does. Just not how you imagine." Isaac's gaze caught a flicker of movement, a sniper's scope adjusting in the shadows. His blood ran cold. "Down!" he barked, yanking Yara behind a shipping container as a gunshot cracked the air, splintering wood inches from their heads. Margaret's chair toppled, her bound form hitting the ground hard. Victor didn't flinch, his smile widening. "You think I'd walk into a trap without one of my own?" Isaac risked a glance, spotting thin wires strung between the pier's supports, blinking red lights betraying explosives. Harper's men, hidden in the shadows, hesitated, their advance stalled by the rigged dock. Isaac's mind raced. "If they rush in, this place goes up," he whispered to Yara. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, met his. "Then we get to Margaret. Keep Victor talking." Isaac stepped out, hands raised, his voice steady. "Victor, you want money. Zurich's yours. Let her go." Victor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I already have everything, Isaac, except the pleasure of watching you burn." Before Isaac could respond, Yara moved, her hands raised but her posture defiant. "Victor, you want me?" she called, stepping into the floodlight. "Let Margaret go and I'm yours. No cops, no mess." Isaac's heart thudded. "Yara, no," he hissed. But she ignored him, her eyes locked on Victor. The older man tilted his head, studying her. "Why trust you now?" Yara's voice was a blade. "Because you know I'm not afraid of you. Alive, I'm leverage. Dead, I'm nothing." A tense pause stretched, the beep of the explosives growing faster. Victor nodded to his man. "Cut the mother loose." The ropes fell, and Margaret stumbled forward, gasping. Yara took a step toward Victor, her hand slipping into her coat, fingers curling around something small and metallic. Her eyes flicked to Isaac for a split second, a warning. Then she lunged, a deafening crack splitting the night as Harper's men charged in. Isaac dove for Margaret, shielding her as gunfire erupted, bullets sparking off metal. Yara's move had shattered Victor's control, and the pier exploded in a roar of fire and debris, the shockwave knocking them flat. Isaac dragged Margaret to safety, scanning the chaos for Yara. She emerged from the smoke, blood streaking her cheek, but alive. As they stumbled toward the SUV, Victor was gone, swallowed by the inferno. Isaac's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You can't kill what you can't catch." The words seared into him, proof of Victor's survival. Yara's hand gripped his arm, her voice hoarse. "He's not done." Isaac nodded, the dock's ruins smoldering behind them. The evidence of Victor's crimes, scattered in the wreckage, would damn him, but only if they could find him. As they sped into the night, a new question burned. What had Yara reached for in her coat, and how much deeper did her secrets run? The ruins of Pier 39 smoldered behind them, a jagged scar against the Manhattan skyline. As Isaac Thornton sped through the night, Yara Monroe's question, how much deeper did her secrets run, echoing in his mind like the taunting text from Victor. "You can't kill what you can't catch." The SUV's engine hummed, a low counterpoint to the tension between him and Yara, her blood-streaked cheek a stark reminder of her reckless gambit on the dock. Margaret, safe in the back seat, clutched Isaac's jacket, her breath uneven but steady. The evidence of Victor's money laundering, scattered in the wreckage, was a weapon. But Victor's escape meant the war was far from won. As they pulled into the underground garage of Isaac's penthouse tower, the city's neon glow felt colder, more treacherous, as if it too were part of Victor's game. Inside the penthouse, the floor-to-ceiling windows framed a city that seemed to watch them back. Isaac poured 3 glasses of scotch, sliding one to Yara, who stood by the kitchen island, Her crimson scarf discarded, her eyes distant. Margaret sank into a leather armchair, her frail frame dwarfed by its expanse. "What did you reach for back there?" Isaac asked Yara, his voice low but sharp, cutting through the silence. Her fingers paused on the glass, her gaze flicking to him, guarded. "A knife," she said, her tone flat. "I wasn't going to let Victor walk away." Isaac's eyes narrowed, unconvinced. A knife didn't explain the metallic glint he'd seen, the deliberate weight of her glance. Before he could press, the intercom buzzed, the doorman's voice strained. "Mr. Thornton, a package was left at the desk. No return address, marked urgent." Isaac exchanged a glance with Yara, her expression tightening. "Send it up," he said, his pulse quickening. Moments later, the elevator chimed, revealing a plain cardboard box. Isaac carried it to the kitchen island, slicing it open with a letter opener. Inside lay a black envelope and a single cufflink, its silver surface stained with dried blood. Victor's cufflink, unmistakable from the Gala. Yara's breath caught, her composure fracturing. Isaac tore open the envelope, revealing a Polaroid of Detective Samuel Harper, bound to a chair, a bruise swelling his jaw. Scrawled on the back in block letters, "Trade for the drive, midnight, alone." Isaac's grip tightened, the photograph a silent ultimatum. "What drive?" he demanded, turning to Yara. Her eyes locked on the cufflink, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a flash drive. Proof of everything Victor's done. Bank transfers, shell companies, names. I took it when I left him years ago." Isaac's mind raced, connecting Reed's documents, the peer's evidence, and now this. "You've had it all this time?" he asked, his tone edged with betrayal. Yara stepped closer, her gaze unflinching. "It was my insurance, Isaac. Victor owned me. My brother's debts, my family's lives. That drive was the only thing keeping me free." Her words carried a rawness that pierced his skepticism, but the photograph of Harper, bloodied and captive, anchored his resolve. "Where is it?" he asked. Yara hesitated, then crossed to her bag, pulling out a small black case. She opened it, revealing a sleek flash drive. "Here. But if you give it to him, Harper dies anyway." Isaac's jaw clenched, the weight of the decision pressing against him. Victor's trap at Pier 39 had nearly killed them. This was another move in his game. "We don't give him the real one," Isaac said, his voice steady. "We make a fake." Yara's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise giving way to a nod. "It buys us time to find Harper," she said, her tone shifting to something resolute, almost conspiratorial. Margaret, silent until now, spoke, her voice fragile but firm. "Isaac, you're playing with fire. Victor's not just after the drive. He's after control." Her words, laced with a mother's fear, echoed the recognition Isaac had seen in her eyes at the Gala. "What do you know about Yara, Mother?" he asked, his gaze piercing. Margaret's lips parted, but she shook her head, retreating into silence. The plan took shape in the penthouse's sterile light. Isaac retrieved an identical flash drive from his safe, loading it with dummy files, enough to fool Victor for a moment. Yara worked beside him, her fingers deft as she copied meaningless data, her silence heavy with unspoken history. "Why did you come back?" Isaac asked, breaking the quiet. "After escaping Victor, why risk this?" Yara's hands stilled, her eyes meeting his. "Because I knew you'd be the one to take him down. You're not like him, Isaac." Her words hung between them, a fragile bridge over the chasm of his distrust. He wanted to believe her, but the metallic glint from the pier, the secrets she still held, kept him wary. As midnight approached, Isaac prepared to face Victor, the fake drive in his pocket, Yara's real one locked in his safe. The city outside pulsed with a deceptive calm, its lights masking the danger awaiting them. Margaret's warning lingered, as did the question of Yara's true loyalties. Was she his ally, or Victor's pawn playing a deeper game? The elevator doors closed behind them, the descent a plunge into uncertainty. Victor's cufflink, blood-stained and cold, sat on the counter, a reminder that this trade was no negotiation. It was a gauntlet. And as they stepped into the night, Isaac knew the real trap wasn't at midnight, but in the shadows of Yara's past, waiting to be sprung. The real trap wasn't at midnight, but in the shadows of Yara Monroe's past, and as Isaac Thornton stepped out of the elevator into the biting Manhattan night, the blood-stained cufflink left behind seemed to pulse with Victor's menace. The fake flash drive weighed heavily in his pocket, a calculated deception to save Detective Harper. But Yara's guarded eyes, holding secrets deeper than her admitted history with Victor, kept Isaac on edge. The city's skyline loomed like a silent judge as they drove toward the rendezvous, the question of Yara's loyalties, a blade at his throat. Before they reached their destination, a new message arrived, not from Victor, but from an unknown source. Rue de Clou, Saint Martin, Paris, midnight. Answers wait. Attached was a grainy image of Victor's wallet, its leather worn, lying on a rain-slicked pavement. Isaac's breath caught. Victor dead? Or another of his games? Yara's face tightened as she saw the image. "We have to go," she said, her voice low but resolute. Isaac nodded, the decision made in the space of a heartbeat. Paris held the key to unraveling Victor's empire, and they could not wait. Within 12 hours, Isaac, Yara, and Margaret boarded a red-eye flight to Paris, the hum of the jet engines a low counterpoint to the tension between them. Margaret, her frail hands clutching a shawl, feigned sleep, but her silence spoke of secrets she hadn't yet shared. Yara stared out the window, the shrinking lights of New York reflecting in her dark eyes. Isaac leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "What's waiting in Paris, Yara? No more half-truths." She turned, her gaze steady but shadowed. "It's not just about Victor's money. It's about what he hid to protect it. A ledger, every name, every deal, every life he's bought. I know where it is, but I'm not the only one." Her words hung heavy, a warning that Paris was no sanctuary but a battlefield. They landed at Charles de Gaulle, under a gray Parisian sky, the air thick with the promise of rain. By nightfall, they navigated the cobblestone alleys of the Marais. The address from the message, Rue de Clou, Saint Martin. A narrow street where a dim street lamp flickered above a heavy wooden door, marked by a brass plate. A figure leaned against the wall, cigarette smoke curling around his face. Julian, the stranger who'd sent the message, crushed the cigarette under his heel as they approached. "You made good time," he said, his voice rough, his smirk sharp. "You said midnight," Isaac replied, his tone clipped. Julian's grin widened. "I lied. Early's safer." He unlocked the door, leading them into a narrow hallway that opened into an empty art gallery, its white walls bare, the air heavy with varnish and secrets. Yara scanned the room, her posture tense. "The ledger's not here," she said, her voice low. Julian nodded, moving to a spiral staircase in the corner. Victor wasn't stupid. "It's below, in the wine cellar." They descended into a damp, low-ceiling space lined with dusty bottles, the air cool and thick with the scent of earth. Julian pried up a rotting floorboard, revealing a steel lockbox. He handed Isaac a small key, its metal cold against his palm. "Your inheritance, Thornton," Julian said, his tone half mocking. Isaac knelt, sliding the key into the lock, when a sharp click echoed through the cellar. 3 men in dark coats stood at the foot of the stairs, pistols drawn. Their leader, a tall man with a shaved head, smiling coldly. "Bonsoir, Yara," he said, his voice smooth as ice. Yara's face paled, her whisper barely audible. "Luke!" Isaac's grip tightened on the lockbox, his pulse spiking. Friend of yours? He asked, his voice steady despite the threat. Luke's smile widened, his eyes glinting with malice. We worked together once until she stole from me. Hand over the box, Thornton, or I take it in pieces. Julian muttered under his breath. This is why I said Paris was trouble. Yara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. You want the box, Luke? Take me instead. Isaac's head snapped toward her. What are you doing? He hissed, but Yara's eyes were locked on Luke, unflinching. You know I'm worth more alive, she said, her tone a dangerous blend of defiance and calculation. Luke laughed, a low, predatory sound. Always the martyr, Yara. But you're not the prize tonight. His gaze shifted to the lockbox, then back to Isaac. You think you're the first Thornton to cross me? Victor made the same mistake. The air grew heavier, the standoff teetering on a knife's edge. Yara's hand twitched toward her sleeve, a subtle movement Isaac caught, but couldn't decipher. Was it another knife, like at the pier, or something more? Julian shifted beside him, his hand hovering near his coat, ready to act. Isaac's mind raced. Luke knew Yara, knew Victor, and wanted the ledger. But why? And who had sent Julian that wallet? The lockbox felt like a grenade in his hands, its contents a mystery that could either save them or seal their fate. As Luke's men raised their weapons, the cellar's shadows seemed to tighten, whispering of a past Yara hadn't fully revealed and a danger that followed them across the ocean. The shadows of the Paris cellar tightened around Isaac Thornton, the lockbox in his hands a ticking grenade as Luke's men raised their weapons, their leader's cold smile promising blood. Yara Monroe's past, a tangled web of betrayal and coercion, had followed them across the ocean, and her subtle hand movement toward a hidden blade, or something more, left Isaac teetering between trust and suspicion. Luke's taunt, Victor made the same mistake, echoed with a threat that tied Yara to his uncle's empire in ways she hadn't yet confessed. As the standoff poised on a razor's edge, Julian's low mutter broke the silence. We need to move. Isaac's grip on the lockbox tightened, his mind racing to decipher Yara's role and the mysterious wallet that had lured them to Paris. But time ran out as Luke's finger twitched on his pistol's trigger, and the cellar's damp air ignited with the promise of violence. Isaac's voice cut through the tension, low and steady. You want the box, Luke? Name your price. Luke's laugh was a jagged blade. You think this is a negotiation, Thornton? Hand it over, or she bleeds first. His gun tilted toward Yara, whose eyes flashed with defiance. Before Isaac could respond, Julian lunged, knocking a bottle from the rack. It shattered, drawing a shot from one of Luke's men, and chaos erupted. Yara moved like a shadow, her hidden blade slashing the nearest gunman's wrist, his pistol clattering to the floor. Isaac dove for the lockbox, tucking it inside his jacket as he tackled Luke, the two crashing into a stack of crates. Gunfire echoed, bottles exploding in a spray of glass and wine. Yara's voice pierced the din. Find me before he does! She vanished up the staircase, Luke's men in pursuit, leaving Isaac and Julian scrambling for cover. The lockbox was secure. Isaac opened it, revealing a leather-bound ledger and a brass key engraved with 387. Julian whistled low. Victor's empire mapped out. Names, deals, millions. Isaac scanned a page. Carter Holdings, circled in red, with a note. Transfer to Luke upon termination. He's not just after the ledger, Isaac said, his voice grim. He wants my family's company. Julian pocketed the key. Then we find Yara before he does. A contact of Julian's, a wiry man at a Canal Saint Martin cafe, revealed Luke's hideout, an abandoned freight yard outside Paris, heavily guarded. Go in quietly, the man warned, tossing back the key as payment. Loud, and you're dead. By midnight, Isaac, Julian and Margaret crouched in the shadows of a drainage canal, the freight yards looming ahead, its rusted containers stark under sodium lights. Dark clothing and suppressed weapons kept them hidden as they slipped through the water, emerging behind a stack of crates. Guards patrolled yards away, oblivious. Julian took one out with a swift chokehold, his body slumping silently. Isaac signaled Margaret to stay low, her presence a risk, but her insistence unwavering. Through a grimy office window, Isaac saw Yara, tied to a chair, a bruise darkening her cheek, Luke looming over her, his voice soft, almost tender. "You should have stayed gone, Yara," he said, his hand grazing her jaw. Isaac's stomach twisted, his grip tightening on his pistol. Julian whispered, "Take the shot now." Isaac shook his head. "Too risky. We get closer." They inched toward the office door, hearts pounding, when Luke turned, his eyes locking on Isaac through the glass. His slow, knowing smile was an invitation, not surprise. "He knows we're here," Isaac muttered. Margaret's voice crackled through their comms. "2 guards, north corner, 30 seconds." Isaac braced against the doorframe, Julian at his side. "On my mark," Isaac said, kicking the door in. Julian dropped the first guard with a silenced shot, but Luke was faster, yanking Yara's chair in front of him, a knife at her throat. "Careful, Thornton," he drawled. "One move and she's gone." Isaac's gun didn't waver. "Let her go, Luke, you've got the box." Luke's eyes flicked to the lockbox, now in Julian's hands. "The key," he said, his voice ice. "Give it to me." Yara's gaze met Isaac's, a silent plea shimmering beneath her fear. Isaac tossed a duplicate key, forged in New York, across the floor, its clatter a distraction. Luke bent to retrieve it, and Yara tore free, elbowing his jaw. The room exploded, gunfire, shouts, furniture crashing. Margaret burst in, dropping a guard with a precise shot, her hands steady despite her frailty. Isaac grabbed Yara, pulling her toward the exit as Julian returned fire. Luke ducked behind a desk, his voice echoing, "I'll burn it all before you win, Thornton." A muffled boom shook the freight yards, heat slamming their backs as they dove into the canal. The office collapsed in flames, metal screaming. Soaked and gasping on the far bank, Yara gripped Isaac's arm, her voice hoarse. "You gave him the key." Isaac shook his head, water dripping from his hair. "A fake. The real one's in New York." Julian stared, impressed. "Clever bastard." Sirens wailed in the distance, but Luke's threat lingered, a promise of retribution. As they staggered away, Isaac's mind churned. What did Luke know of Yara's betrayal? And what secrets did the real key guard, locked away across the ocean? The real key, locked away in New York, held secrets that could unravel Victor's empire. But as Isaac Thornton staggered from the canal's icy grip, Luke's parting threat, "I'll burn it all before you win," rang louder than the distant sirens piercing the Parisian night. The freight yards burned behind them, a pyre of twisted metal and shattered plans. Yet Yara Monroe's hand on his arm anchored him to the present. Her bruised face, illuminated by the inferno's glow, carried a faint smile, a flicker of defiance that stirred something in Isaac. Trust, perhaps, or something deeper he dared not name. Julian, soaked and grim, scanned the shadows for pursuit, while Margaret, her silver hair plastered to her face, stood resolute despite her frailty. The ledger, clutched in Isaac's jacket, and the brass key in New York were their weapons. But Luke's escape meant the war was far from over. As they slipped into a waiting car, the city's rain-slicked streets gleamed like a mirror to their precarious alliance. Back at a safe house on the outskirts of Paris, a cramped apartment above a shuttered boulangerie, the air was thick with the scent of damp wool and stale coffee. Isaac spread the ledger across a scarred wooden table, its pages a labyrinth of names, dates, and transactions, millions laundered through Victor's forged art, with Luke's name circled as his heir. Yara traced a line with her finger, her voice low. This isn't just about money, it's power. Control over your family's legacy. Isaac's gaze met hers, searching for the truth behind her words. Her rule, no falling in love, echoed from their first meeting, a barrier now crumbling under the weight of their shared survival. Why risk this for me? He asked, his tone softer than he intended. Yara's eyes flickered, a shadow of vulnerability passing through them. Because you're the only one who can end this, and because I'm tired of running. Margaret, seated by a cracked window, broke her silence. Isaac? She's right. Victor's not just stealing from the company, he's stealing our name. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with a mother's fierce resolve. She reached into her shawl, producing a folded letter, its edges worn. This came to me before the gala. It's why I recognized Yara. Isaac took it, unfolding a note in Victor's handwriting. Keep her close, Margaret. She's the key to everything. His blood chilled. You knew about her? He asked, his voice sharp. Margaret's eyes glistened. Not her past, but Victor's obsession. He spoke of a woman who could ruin him years ago. I didn't know it was Yara until I saw her. The revelation tightened the knot in Isaac's chest. Yara's past with Victor, her coerced servitude. And now this letter painted her as both pawn and threat. Yet her actions at the freight yards, risking herself for Margaret, spoke of loyalty he couldn't ignore. Julian, leaning against the wall, broke the tension. We've got the ledger, but Luke's got men and motive. He'll come for that key. Isaac nodded, his mind racing. Then we beat him to it. Back to New York. We open the safe deposit box and end this. Yara's hand brushed his, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him. Luke knows me, she said. He'll expect me to run. Let's use that. They devised a plan, returned to New York, retrieved the real key, and leaked the ledger's contents to Daniel Reed, the journalist, to expose Luke publicly. But the safe house's dim light cast long shadows, and Isaac's thoughts lingered on Yara's rule. Was it a shield for her, or a warning for him? As they prepared to leave, a sharp knock rattled the door. Julian drew his weapon, motioning for silence. Isaac cracked the door, revealing a courier holding a small package, no sender's name. Inside was a single photograph. Yara, younger, laughing beside Luke in a Parisian cafe, with Victor in the background, his smile predatory. Scrawled on the back, "Ask her about the deal." Isaac's grip tightened, his eyes locking on Yara. What deal? He demanded, holding up the photo. Her face drained of color, her voice a whisper. Luke was Victor's enforcer. I made a deal to save my brother, work for them, or he died. I didn't know it would bind me for years. Her words cracked, raw with guilt, and Isaac felt the ground shift. Love, or its absence, had driven her choices, just as it drove his need to protect Margaret. He tucked the photo away, his resolve hardening. No more secrets, he said, his voice firm, but not unkind. Yara nodded, her eyes holding his, a silent vow. As they boarded a dawn flight to New York, the Parisian skyline faded, but Luke's threat loomed like a storm. The key, safe in Isaac's vault, held the final piece of Victor's empire, but opening it risked exposing Yara's deepest betrayal. What had she traded to survive Luke's world? And could Isaac trust the bond growing between them? Or was it the final trap in a game where love was the deadliest move? The plane's engines roared, carrying them toward a reckoning that would test not just their alliance, but the legacy of love they both carried. As a game of shadows draws its final curtain in this chapter, we invite you to share your thoughts on Isaac and Yara's perilous journey. Where do you think their path leads next, and whose secrets will unravel first? Your insights breathe life into this tale, and we're grateful for your engagement with their world of intrigue and loyalty. Thank you for joining us in this gripping saga. We eagerly await your return for the next chapter, where the stakes of love and betrayal will rise even higher.